Hello, and welcome to Sunrise Podcast, where we talk about everything under the sun. In today's episode, we will review the convictions given to an innocent Canadian man, David Milgaard, who had spent a total of 23 years in jail due to a poor investigation and limited technologies.
And just to recap for anyone just tuning in, my name is Destiny, and I'm here with Shane.
That's me.
And Dylan.
Hello. And just another reminder that we are Sunrise Podcast, and even though we sometimes talk about psychotic topics, we always hope to brighten up your day.
Well, at least those are our intentions. We apologize if any of our facts appear disturbing, but we only wish to spread the knowledge about headlining Canadian events.
What's interesting is this case has actually led up to one of the largest settlements for wrongful convictions in Canadian history, but more on that later.
I also find it strange how David was convicted for murder and rape at the young age of 16, yet there was still evidence that Larry Fisher, the real culprit, could be a suspect.
I agree. First, we're going to recap on what had happened the year that David was arrested.
On January 31st, 1969, David and his friends Ron Wilson, Nicole John, and Albert Cadrian set out on a road trip from Regina to Vancouver. The three friends traveled from Regina to Saskatoon to pick up Albert Cadrian, who rented out the basement of his house to Larry Fisher and his wife.
During the time of their visit, a young nurse in her 20s named Gail Miller was found raped and killed in a snowbank near the area of Albert's house. The police interviewed over 160 suspects but recovered nothing. That wasn't until Albert admitted to the police that he remembered David acting strange the morning of the murder, and that he also had blood on his clothes.
But let's not forget that around this time, they were all occasional hallucinogenic drug users. In reality, the blood on his clothes could have came from anywhere, and the police didn't have the technology to properly match that blood to Gail's.
The police also interviewed David's other friends, Nicole and Ron. Originally, they had told the police that they had been with David the morning of the murder, but through repetitive interrogation and isolation, their stories began to develop into what the police wanted to hear. Ron had claimed to hear David mentioning things that associated him with the murder. Nicole had even told them she saw the murder with her own eyes.
On May 30th, 1969, David was convicted for the rape and murder of Gail Miller. He was given a life sentence at a young age of 16.
In the meantime, as David was facing the consequences of his convictions, Larry Miller had been arrested for 5 counts of rape, possession of a weapon, and robbery.
Sophie Manager was looking to rob somebody.
3 months after Miller's sentence ended, he raped and killed a 56-year-old woman and was sentenced to an additional 14 years.
To me, it seems pretty obvious that this man should be a suspect, but everyone around that time had refused to believe that the courts had made a mistake. When David's case was in court, Nicole and Ron's testimonies were used against David, but when Nicole was asked on stand, she refused to mention that she saw David kill Gail.
David may have been declared guilty, but he knew he was not, and tried multiple times to convince the higher court of this fact. His attempts failed, resulting in a total of 23 years in prison, where he was subjected to physical and sexual assault. David had tried killing himself several times and even managed to escape the prison for 77 days. That was until he was shot and recaptured by the RCMP.
David's mother never stopped searching for Gail's true killer because she knew her son could not have committed such a vicious act. Then Larry Fisher's own ex-wife had admitted to the Saskatchewan police that she believed Gail Miller was a victim of her husband's multiple assaults and had information on why she believed so. Although this was a huge lead, the police never pursued it.
Then, in 1992, a conclusion was made by the court that a new trial shall be ordered and David released from prison as soon as his conviction was dismissed. Even though he was not in jail, his name was still not cleared in what the courts called a stay of proceedings. And since this was 23 years after his initial conviction, there was an introduction of forensic techniques that allowed them to test DNA found on Gail Miller's clothing.
Let me guess. Larry Fisher?
Good job, Shane. David's name was finally cleared and he was given $10 million in compensation from the Saskatchewan government. And finally, Larry was convicted for the rape and murder of Gail Miller in November 1999.
Wow. What I would do with $10 million. Buy a Ferrari, hire my own personal chef, even purchase a moped so cruising around my lakeside mansion is easier. You know, go all out.
Don't get too excited. Let's not forget he spent most of his prime years in prison for something he didn't do. I don't think you'd be very eager to do that if you had to waste that much of your life.
Also, how much society would have changed while he was in jail? It would be like going into a whole new world with the advancements that would have happened. Sure, the money would be great, but that's a lot of years that he would get back.
Well, what do you guys think was the biggest mistake in the entire case? For me, I would have to say that it was most likely lazy judgment made by the courts, because nobody had any real proof, so they took the only proof they could get and used it to make their final decision.
Personally, I believe it was the interrogation process and the methods they used to nearly force the witnesses to give them the statement they required, which is in turn what put David Milgaard behind bars.
I agree with you, Shane, that the interrogation process was wrong. The interrogator kept pressuring the witnesses until they got the answer they wanted.
I don't know about you guys, but I think the reason Nicole and Ron's stories had changed was due to their drug addictions. And by that, I mean they were adamant drug users and had been isolated for 2 weeks for police interrogation. With all the stress of what was going on, they needed to relax and escape.
Yes, I agree. With all the pressure of being interrogated and having withdrawals, Nicole and Ron just wanted out, so they changed their stories to what the police wanted to hear. But I still believe that the police shouldn't have kept pressuring Nicole and Ron into giving the required testimony.
Personally, I believe it wasn't even about their drug addictions. Who knows what the police said to them in that room and the environment they were subdued in for over 2 weeks. I think that after 2 weeks of pure isolation from the outside world, anybody would have broke down and would do what they had to be set free.
The police definitely should have realized that they were desperate to leave and turned to the easiest solution. But the thing is, there are many different stories that suggest that Nicole, Albert, and Ron had alternate testimonies. One version says they broke down near a snowbank and went different directions to find help in the area of the murder, and then, apparently, Albert had said he saw David stabbing someone in an alleyway.
See, that's the thing. Considering we weren't directly involved, we have no true idea as to what had happened. There have been so many stories that have come about, but who's to say any of them are actually true? Maybe nobody knows the real truth. And what if David did actually do it? I know they took a DNA test and all, but how do you know that the DNA hadn't been altered from 23 years of sitting there?
That's a good question, and I honestly have no idea if that's possible, but it's an interesting theory. Maybe you could look into it.
Already on it, I searched to see if the DNA testing had ever been invalid and it did come up with a few instances when mistakes were made. However, semen samples are very easily to identify and have never been wrong. In this case, Larry Fisher's semen was uncovered on Gail's clothing, showing hard proof it was Larry.
Well, there we have it. It had to have been Larry that raped and killed Gail Miller. Everything points to him, and he obviously had the audacity to kill women before and even after he raped them. What do you guys think?
I think that we can all conclude that it must have been Larry. If any of our viewers have any suggestions about future discussion topics or any comments to our current podcast, please visit our website at www.sunrisepodcast.com.
And while you're there, you should definitely check out our music and don't forget to rock on till dawn.
Goodbye!